watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back into a special Wednesday edition of Roll Tide Daily. My name is Mike Johnson. I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes, bringing you the latest and greatest in Alabama football and really all the sports over at the University of Alabama. Thank you guys for joining us. As always, we have a packed show loaded down for you today with a ton of Alabama content. So if you will join us on Facebook, if you'll join us on YouTube, if you'll get your comments in, your questions in, please share the video off the top. Make sure all your friends that love Alabama football are joining us as well. We have no guests today, but we have a packed schedule full of a lot of content. We're going to talk about Jalen. We're going to talk about Joe Pendry. We're going to talk about Nick Saban in the NFL. And as always, we're going to have the Scott Cochran video of the week here for this Wednesday finale before we get back with you tomorrow. But after saying all that, let's dive into topic number one, because I think it's a really, really juicy one, and it's something you guys are really going to enjoy. I got to give Bruce Feldman over at The Athletic a ton of credit for what he wrote yesterday over at his website. He had a chance this past weekend. We brought you all the video from the Elite 11 camp out in California, right? You saw Jalen, you saw Tua, you saw Tagovailoa, you saw Paul Tyson. These guys kind of competing out there. They're hanging out with campers. They're hanging out with high school kids. Well, it turns out that Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa actually got a chance to speak to the Elite 11 campers, and Bruce Feldman from The Athletic was a part of the audience that day. He gets the chance to kind of get out Jalen Hurts' words here, and these are some of his words to the campers in terms of what he was talking about going into the national title game, kind of his mindset of being a teammate and a good quarterback and really loving Tua. He says, "Nothing is ever about me. It's always about my team. I always put them first. I can't do it on my own. Treat your teammates the right way. You have to be able to love. I learned from a leadership class we took last year. You have to be able to love. I'm not a soft dude. That's how I can better myself, by actually opening up and loving who I am with and my surrounding cast." He goes on to say, "I try to be humble and I try to do the right things. Everyone in here has parents or someone who has raised them and taught them this is the right way to do things and this is the wrong way. You've got a decision to make about whether to do it the right way or not." Now, I don't know about you guys, but after reading some of those comments from Jalen Hurts, and later on in the evening, Tua Tagovailoa gets a chance to kind of stand up in front of the same audience, the same group of high school quarterbacks that are really trying to figure out their own path, right? And what better example than having Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa stand up kind of in front of this group and really give their opinions about their relationship. Tua also goes on to tell a great story about how Jalen Hurts gave him a pep talk going into the second half. He said, "Hey, listen, Tua, this is the same football you played back in Hawaii. This is the same way you've been doing it your whole life. Just go out and enjoy the game and have a ton of fun." And I got to tell you guys, just being an Alabama alum, being a guy that used to suit up in that uniform, being a guy that rooted for this football team week in and week out last year, just like every one of you guys did, it really melted my heart, man. It as if I wasn't already rooting for Jalen Hurts enough. And when I say rooting for Jalen Hurts and we love Jalen Hurts and we wish him the best, I'm not saying I'm rooting for Jalen Hurts to win the quarterback job. That's for Nick Saban to decide. That's for Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa to decide. But what I am telling you is that no matter what Jalen Hurts decides to do next year, if it's stay in the Alabama program as a backup, if it's transfer, if it's redshirt, if it's head somewhere else or do something else, you can't help but root for the guy. Reading his words right there, that he's able to kind of speak to the Elite 11, that he's able to really talk to these high school campers about being a selfless teammate. You know, Trent Dilfer's kind of the head of one of these camps out there when it comes to the Elite 11, and he talked a little bit about, how he looked at Jalen Hurts at halftime. He looked at Tua in the second half and thought how proud he was, and then he thought he was even more proud after the game about what Jalen Hurts kind of brought to the table. I know you guys will have a ton to weigh in the comment section. We're going to get to you comments in just a second, but I want to make sure everybody is really, really kind of taking in how lucky this Alabama program is to have two guys like Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. Just incredibly classy comments right there, captured by Bruce Feldman at theathletic.com. He did a good job of kind of enveloping or kind of showcasing just how good of guys these two were. I think we get so lost as Alabama fans and we look at it and say, you know what? I want this guy. This guy can throw these many touchdown passes. This guy can run. These are 19, 20-year-old kids. These are kids that are competing in college. These are not guys getting paid millions of dollars. These are no salaries. This is a guy in Jalen Hurts who, like you kind of said, Bruce through Bruce Feldman right there. He's just trying to be a good teammate. Just trying to kind of highlight the way his parents raised him and making sure that he's doing all the right things throughout life. Rebecca Butler Hawkins weighs in on the Facebook comment page. Wow, what an awesome team player and a heart for the game. James Perkin weighing back in. We're lucky to have both of these guys. Beth Lawson kind of echoing some of the comments I made earlier. Yes, he is just a very classy guy. Dean Mitchell as the one on here saying Jalen Hurts is a class act. Appreciate you guys all continuing to weigh in. It's just I want to make sure we're not crossing over this bridge too early with this Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, because I feel like that Bama fans have kind of been ripped in half this offseason, right? Everybody wants some kind of catastrophe. Everybody wants to know when the mighty is going to fall, when the dynasty is going to die. You feel like this program might be being torn apart in a lot of spots. When is Jalen Hurts going to leave? Is he going to transfer? Is this one of those things that's going to splinter the locker room? What is Mac Jones? Where does he kind of fit in? Is Tua Tagovailoa going to be able to stay healthy? Can we not just for a second sit back and just enjoy having both of these classy individuals at the University of Alabama? Does it always have to be a question for Nick Saban of when one of these guys is going to get the boot, when he's going to name his starter? Is he going to try to get Jalen to stay? Is he going to wait till week 3 or 4? Is Tua going to be able to stand up against an Auburn defense? When is he going to crown a starter? Can we not just sit back as Bama fans and just kind of agree to watch what's going on in front of our eyes, watch how classy these guys are, watch how awesome it is to see both of these talents really on display? I'm kind of one of those guys that's in the Tua camp, right? I think that Tua, his ceiling is incredibly high. When you look at the offensive line, when you look at the wide receivers, they could be coming back. I think Tua can go out there and possibly make a run at a Heisman Trophy with just some of the things you hear about him, some of the things you've already seen him do in this program. But let's not forget about Jalen Hurts. And I think this is an opportunity throughout this Bruce Feldman article to kind of look at what Jalen Hurts has meant to this program, 26-2 as a starter. He could have taken that stage after halftime, after the national title game, and said, you know what, he could have pouted, right? He could have pouted. He could have gone on and said, I can't believe they benched me. I've done everything for this football team. Instead, he kind of wraps his arm around Tua Tagovailoa right there at the end and says, you know what, this is great for our team. I'm so happy for Tua. I'm so happy for my teammates. I'm so happy for our coaches. I'm so happy for Bama fans that they're able to, be a part of this national championship tradition and really do a lot of good things. Dean Mitchell weighing in. There's an extreme amount of pressure on both Jalen and Tua, but yet they are great friends. And Ben Brunson kind of weighing in and says, I hope he stays at Bama. I think it's a good point there from Dean Mitchell in the comment section, talking about how good of friends these guys are. I think this has been captured a couple times by writers from across the country. There's no animosity. These two, when you watch them embrace last year, when Tua Tagovailoa threw his first touchdown pass, when he did some of the incredible things he did against Vanderbilt last year, Jalen Hurts was the first one there hugging him. There was never a question of whether or not you're going to be excited for him. You weren't going to sit on the bench. You weren't going to do like some of the situations we saw last year up at the University of Tennessee with Jarrett Garantano and Quentin Dormany, where you kind of sit and pout on the bench. You don't want to be a part of the game plan. You don't want to watch what the other quarterback's doing. You don't want to root him on. You don't want to talk about coverages. That's not what we've seen out of Jalen Hurts. That's not what we've seen out of Tua Tagovailoa, and I think it's time that a lot of people around the country, not just Bama fans, start to put them in the correct category of really being truly classy guys that we're happy to have there in Tuscaloosa. Penny Ramsey Cox saying, don't leave, work together. Victoria Lynn Burdnick saying, love Jalen and hope he stays. I think I get this question all the time about how I think this is going to play out and how I really, really could see this kind of connection between Jalen and Tua next season. I think it's best for the program, and if I'm being honest, I think it's best for Jalen if he stays in Tuscaloosa. I think obviously he wants to be QB1. He wants to be a starter. His dad's come out and said, he's really a starting quarterback. He wants a chance to move on to the next level. I think he's going to get enough reps, and I think he's going to get a chance enough to showcase his ability there at Alabama to where he doesn't have to move on somewhere else. He doesn't have to possibly lose that year, doesn't have to learn a new system. I think that when you talk about Jalen Hurts as an ability to adapt to an NFL style of offense and an NFL program, Alabama's probably the best place for him. And when you look really what those guys could connect, I could see Tua playing 70%, Jalen playing 30%, maybe even more of a percentage for Jalen Hurts moving forward. But I do think it's in Jalen's best interest if he sticks around that program and is able to do a lot of the things we've come accustomed to watching Jalen Hurts be able to do. Going back in the comment section, I got Sissy Woodall, Levensaler. Hope I'm saying that right. They're both fine young men. Their moms and dads raised them right. God bless them both. Can't wait for some Bama. I can't wait for some Bama either. I think we're at 87 days possibly now until Alabama kicks off against Louisville. I definitely think it's one of those things where I hope both quarterbacks are still on the roster by then and we get a chance to watch both of them kind of showcase their ability. Brian Canterbury weighing in said, it'd be cool to have you block for both of them, Mike. Trust me, I would have loved to block for both of them, too. I got lucky enough to block for Mark Ingram back in 2009 and Trent Richardson and Glenn Coffey and Roy Upchurch and Greg McElroy and John Parker Wilson. I had a great, talented cast behind me as well, so I appreciate you weighing in and saying that. James Perkin weighing in says, how cool would it be to see Tua throw a pass to Jalen next year? Now, listen, I don't think Jalen's one of those guys that switches positions or becomes an H-back or becomes a lead blocker or, a slot wide receiver, but how cool would it be if you could get both these guys on field in some type of wildcat package, really to be able to throw those defenses off balance, just in some of those tricky situations, right? The 3rd and 2s, the 3rd and 3s, maybe even the 3rd and 1s, goal line packages, red zone. I think it's incredible to kind of watch that. William Chung kind of weighing in and saying, roll tide, Jalen Intua. And like I've been saying all along, I want to make sure we capture just how special both of those individuals are in terms of what they've meant to this program. Moving on to topic number 2 today, and this one is also a special one to my heart, guys. Yesterday it was announced through Matt Zenitz at AL.com that Joe Pendry, the longtime offensive line coach and really the right-hand man of Nick Saban, he's held an entire showcase of topics or titles. If you want to talk about what Joe Pendry's meant to the Alabama program, NFL liaison, special assistants, he's been called the grandfather, really, by Nick Saban, the right-hand man of everything that's going on in the program. You'll remember Joe Pendry retired from offensive line coaching back in 2011, but he stuck around the program. Nick Saban asked him to stick around the program, be a part of the front office. Well, news coming out yesterday that Joe Pendry is leaving the program for good. He's retiring right here. This is a quote from Nick Saban from back in 2016. There was a special article written on AL.com, and I think this kind of encapsulates exactly what Joe Pendry has meant to this football team. Even after he retired as a coach, he's been a valuable part of making sure as coaches we are doing things so we can help our players grow and develop. He's a great friend who is very much trusted by myself and everyone in this organization as the, quote, grandfather, so to speak. I can't tell you how close this topic kind of is to my heart, guys. And obviously we come on here and chop it up a ton on Roll Tide Daily. We talked about all the latest stuff. And a lot of people are probably coming in, reading this on on Twitter yesterday, reading this on AL.com, reading it on Facebook saying, well, who is Joe Pendry? Brent Key is the offensive line coach. Michael Locksley is the offensive coordinator. Joe Pendry is the backbone of this program and has been the backbone of this program since Nick Saban was involved. Joe Pendry has been a football coach for 45 years. Joe Pendry was my offensive line coach. He taught me more about football. He has more football knowledge in his little pinky than I'm ever going to have in my existence, my 31 years here on this earth. I want to make sure that everybody's really paying their due diligence because, listen, Joe Pendry is one of these guys who you don't know what he does. He's behind the scenes. He's a special advisor. He's an NFL liaison, but you can bet your butt that he's sitting in on a lot of these offensive meetings. You have a Dan Enos. You have a Michael Locksley. You have, last year, Brian Dable. You have Lane Kiffin. They're all putting in these crazy plays, right? This guy's going left. This guy's going right. We have all this split in the middle. We're kind of counter-optioning. This guy coming off the edge. Joe Pendry is one of those guys that sits there and says, well, what if this happens? Or this is your issue with that? Or who's going to fill that gap? Who's going to block this guy? What happens if they blitz here? He's got 40 years of NFL and college football knowledge going back to all the times that he's been a part of this Alabama football program. Such a special guy. I used to walk in every day and ask Joe Pendry how he's doing, and he'd say, you know what? If I was doing any better, there'd be 2 of me. And that just kind of goes, you guys, to see what I'm talking about in terms of Joe Pendry, just how special of a guy he is, just how much really the Alabama football program, Nick Saban, anybody really who's been an offensive line coach, Mario Cristobal, Brent Key, I mean, you go back and name all these guys, they owe a ton to what Joe Pendry has given this program from his knowledge base and from some of the things that he's been able to kind of put together in that program. Got a ton of you guys still weighing in on Jalen Intua battle. Wayne Stratton saying rolling with Jalen Intua. Mo Williams giving us a roll tide roll. Shayna Wildebrandt Welch says, you were so right about that. Jalen and Tua, they are both so talented. Roll tide, hashtag #1 champions. Jazz Hatcher say they will both get a lot of playing time with all of these blowouts, and we will be dishing out. Now, I think that's the best way you could possibly encapsulate it. I think that's what we're all, we have our fingers crossed. We're hoping for a ton of blowouts, but I don't know if any one of these guys is really kind of weighing their transfer decisions on whether or not we're going to be in the middle of blowouts. I think Alabama's come accustomed. I mean, you watch Vanderbilt last year, you watch Ole Miss, you watch the 63-point games, you watch them cover a 39-point spread against Tennessee. There's going to be the blowouts. But in the end, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, when you do have the Texas A&M games or the Mississippi State games or even the Georgia games, you have to make those decisions about who's going to play quarterback. Is that going to be Tua? Is that going to be Jalen right there? Or is that going to be, a combination of the 2 of them moving forward? So we did just talk about Joe Pendry. We talked about how close Joe Pendry was to my heart. He's the grandfather of the program. When you talk about staff changes, when you talk about what Nick Saban's been able to put together over quite some time, he always kind of hits the ground running. One of the reasons for that is a little bit of the talent he likes to put on these front sevens and in this interior offensive line. Yesterday, Alabama released a highlight video talking about the front seven and what really a lot of those guys might expect coming in next year. And I got to tell you guys, anytime Alabama's graphics department releases a video about a specific position group, it gets me so fired up. I think a lot of these guys on social media look at it. They look at it on Twitter and say, boy, I've got to make sure I step up to the plate. And what you're going to see Raekwon Davis. You're going to see Terrell Lewis. You're going to see Isaiah Buggs. You're going to see Keenan Williams. You're going to see all these guys that were able to make those plays down the stretch last year. I want you guys to sit back, relax. It's the middle of the show right now, and kind of get a load of what Alabama football expects from that front seven in next year's defense.
Hey, guys, I'm going to tell you guys something, man. We got something to prove here. You know what we got to prove? We got to prove that we're one of the best Bama teams. I believe that, but we got to prove that to them guys who are playing. All right, you know how you do that? Everybody's got to make a commitment to the standard that we play to. So you got to check your whole card and your energy level.
Alabama's defense is locked in.
And there is the 5th sack of the night for Bama.
Right now, we talked about that defensive front for Alabama, that they want to try to control the line of scrimmage. They are doing that.
Here they come. Down he goes. Never had a chance. Inside goes nowhere.
There's the difference maker.
Yep, the doctor. Number one they are, number one they will stay.
Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. I know you guys love that, watching that little hype video. You see a little Clemson in there, a little bit of Georgia, a little bit of Florida State, right? Some of these guys rushing the edge before you saw some of those linebackers kind of fall out last year, right? You had the Christian Miller injury, the Anthony Jennings injury. You had really kind of going to the 3 deep. Keith Holcomb kind of getting the start against Mississippi State. Dylan Moses gets a couple of starts and has a couple of great starts before he injures his foot against Auburn. You get a little bit of Mack Wilson in there. You get a little bit of, like I said, Raekwon Davis, Keenan Williams, a lot of these guys rushing the edge. I can't tell you how excited I am from this front seven. I think a lot of the hype surrounding this offseason has been about what this defense can be, what's coming back in the secondary, what's not coming back in the secondary, really. You talk about Deontay Thompson having a couple starts, really losing a lot. You're losing Deshaun Hamilton. You're losing, obviously, Rashaan Evans. You're losing so many guys in the front, but somehow Bama keeps being able to build back. Raekwon Davis, Keenan Williams, obviously be one of those guys to be able to build on. I'd like to hear you guys in the comment section, too. Tell me what you think about the front seven for this upcoming year. How much havoc can these guys really cause, especially if they're able to stay healthy? We know that Christian Miller, Anthony Jennings, a lot of those guys, Terrell Lewis, are going to be in the backfield a ton this coming year. We expect a ton of them, especially Terrell Lewis, Anthony Jennings. What they did against that in that Clemson game was really a highlight of a lot of the things that's going on. Terrence Brand, you kind of weigh in, and I hope Jennings makes a full recovery. Really came on in the Clemson game. Absolutely agree with that. Wayne Stratton said, makes me want to go train and run through a brick wall. Brian Canterbury says, chills. I mean, I kind of wish social media had been around when I had been an offensive lineman. Can we get an offensive line hype video? I think we had, listen, back in 2008, we had kind of a college game day special put on, but it still, I don't think, was as cool as the 60 seconds you guys just got on video from some of those social media teams. We used to get highlight videos all the time. We'd watch, Friday nights before football games. Never offensive line specific. It was always us watching a highlight video the week before, hoping that Eli Gold and somebody up in the booth, Phil Savage or whoever it was, had a chance to mention our number, right? If Eli Gold said, number 78, Mike Johnson leading the way, boy, I was ready to jump out of my shoes. And now these social media teams putting out some of these graphics, putting out some of these highlight videos, really kind of highlighting how special we expect this group. Like I said, Anthony Jennings, Terrell Lewis, Mack Wilson, Dylan Moses, Raekwon Davis, Keenan Williams, Isaiah Buggs. It's going to be a special group, and I don't think we can highlight that any more than to say thank you, Rashaan Evans and Sean Hamilton and everybody else for what you've given us the last few years. But we're turning the page now in terms of that front seven. I think these guys are going to be an incredible group to kind of watch for the next few years to come. Shayna Wildebrandt Welch says, can't wait to watch my Bama boys, 86 more days. Wayne Stratton, we have a lot of tools back on the defense. We do actually have a lot. I don't think a lot of people realize that. Yeah, I know we're missing 6 guys from the back end. You're missing Tony Brown and Hootie Jones and Minka Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison, and we're missing a ton of those guys. But what you're getting back is a ton of guys with upside. You're also adding a couple, right? Patrick Surtain, Savion Smith, Shaheem Carter. A lot of these guys you're going to get to know over the coming years in terms of that secondary. They're going to become a strength. Right now, people are looking at it saying it's a weakness. My point to the people that are saying that right now is you're not counting on this front seven getting to the quarterback as soon as they're probably going to do it this year. Rushing that edge with some of these guys with a ton of length. Is going to be a great thing. Dean Mitchell says Alabama keeps reloading year after year. Mo Williams says thanks for the whole Alabama facilities. Brian Canterbury, thanks for the shout out. Offensive linemen are the heart of the team. Playing quarterback, I respect those. Listen, nobody's going to be on the offensive line more than I am. Talking about those guys, talking about myself and the playing time. Make sure I give a shout out to Joe Pendry during his retirement. Making sure those big guys up front getting the recognition they deserve is definitely something that's always on kind of our hit list. Now, the next topic I want to dive into, actually, it has a little bit to do with some of those guys I just mentioned that are exiting for the NFL. And I think Joe Kime from ESPN.com did a great thing this past week. And I think it's come out yesterday or possibly even the day before. Joe Kime from ESPN.com writes an article about just how important the open door policy for Nick Saban to the NFL scouts has been in terms of these guys getting to the next level. Listen, we've highlighted it a ton of times. I think it's 77 draft picks for Nick Saban there, at the University of Alabama in the last 10 or 11 years. I think 27, possibly, is it 27 first rounders, really, that we've been talking about that the guy's been able to put out. Well, why is that? It's easy to say we're recruiting a ton of 5 stars, a ton of 4 stars. Nick Saban develops them. Scott Cochran gets them in the weight room. They've got a ton of talent surrounding a bunch of them right there. Well, what doesn't get mentioned a ton is what John Keim kind of wrote about yesterday. He talked about Nick Saban's open door policy when it comes to the NFL. Some of the scouts that are sitting around that are trying to enter in and really get a good look at some of these players and the live reps that they're getting inside of these Alabama practices. This is Nick Saban talking to John Keimer, talking to ESPN, a couple of days ago. When I was in the NFL and I wanted to go see a player, places that had a policy that embraced that, you were always looking forward to going there. Places that didn't, you almost didn't want to go sometimes. It was counterproductive for the player in terms of what really the look that they were being able to get from the NFL scouts. And I got to tell you guys, being one of these players in this Nick Saban practice, being one of these guys that are on these fields, being a guy that was in the NFL, talking to some of these scouts, talking to guys like Dave Caldwell, who was now the GM for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Les Snead, who was a scout for the Atlanta Falcons, who is now the GM for the Los Angeles Chargers, I guess it is, or I guess it's Los Angeles Rams. These guys really loved Nick Saban. They were able to abide by all of his rules because he did have an open door policy. There was never a question of when you showed up as a scout to an Alabama practice, what kind of practice you were going to get. There was no, hey, which drill is half speed? Which drill's not half speed? Which drills are going on air? Which drills are not? These guys knew they could show up, they could walk into this practice facility at any time, they could get a look at a player, and they knew that player was well coached and he was going full speed. And I think that really highlights the way Nick Saban talks to a lot of these scouts, right? He kind of brings these guys in, puts his arm around them. He doesn't say, you know what, you can't come in here. You're a scout. You're not part of this program. We don't know why you're here. We don't want you to get a look this day. These guys are able to come in not only to these practices and see when Nick Saban is doing, see what these players are doing. They can walk into Nick Saban's office. They can walk in and ask him how he feels about a certain player. Hey, what do you think this guy's best at? What do you think this guy's assets are? What do you think his weaknesses are? What do you think his strengths are going to be? What do you think he'll test at? Getting that out of Nick Saban, Scott Cochran is such a big thing for a ton of these players. I think when you look at what they've been able to do NFL-wise, it kind of sounds off on really the way Nick Saban is able to kind of put his arm around some of these guys right here. A lot of you guys still weighing in on some of the Jalen Tua talk. Rondre Rogers says, hope Jalen gets a start. Tua is also a great quarterback. Wayne Stratton kind of chiming in on the scouts topic. From what I understand, all the scouts have the red carpet pulled out for them. Christopher McLeod over in the YouTube comment section, going back to the front 7 hype video. Front 7 should be great. That back end is the question. I agree with that. I think it's going to be questionable, but talent's not one of those things that you're going to have to worry about. It's a matter of how quickly they can kind of come together, get adjusted to Louisville's passing attack, Ole Miss's passing attack with Jordan Ta'amu and some of the great things they have over there. Bobby J. Smith weighing in the Facebook comment section as well. The NFL pipeline, if you will, talking about some of those guys that are headed to a lot of these different NFL teams. Before we go back into that, we want to reset for a second. My name is Mike Johnson. Former Alabama football player, got to play under Nick Saban, win a national championship, and now I'm bringing you the best of Alabama football on a daily basis for 30 minutes here on Roll Tide Daily on the SEC Country Alabama outlet. That's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you guys can find us. Make sure you're joining the conversation and sharing the video and doing all the things that you can do to make sure that your friends join in on the conversation, get a chance to talk to us and talk to me, and we ask a ton of questions and we talk back and forth. Building up, like I said, 87 days away, I believe, until Alabama kicks that ball off against Bobby Petrino and Louisville. So we just talked about Nick Saban. We just talked about that kind of red carpet he pulls out for NFL scouts. We just talked about all the guys he's sending to the league. Well, one team and one head coach that has 5 of these guys on the roster for this upcoming year is the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's Doug Marrone, the head coach from down there. I thought Alabama put out an interesting graphic yesterday when it comes to Twitter about just how meaningful it is to have a guy from Alabama. Doug Marrone gets this comment right here, and I think we have the Twitter graphic to show you guys. This is it right here. Built by Bama, hashtag Roll Tide. This is Doug Marrone, the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, talking about Ronnie Harrison, one of the recent draft picks. I think number 93 overall in the 3rd round this past year going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think there's really anything you can throw at, and not just Ronnie, but any of those Alabama DBs. There's not really anything you can throw at them cover-wise and scheme-wise and even technique-wise that maybe they have not seen before. Listen, I know you guys know this, but I'm going to bring you in on a secret if you're not aware. Nick Saban's the greatest secondary coach in possibly the history of college football. When he gets a guy that's being coached up, when you have a guy like Ronnie Harrison or Mika Fitzpatrick, and these scouts come in, a guy like Doug Marrone or the GM down there and Dave Caldwell, they look at the system, they say, you know what, this guy's got a PhD in football, one of the smartest players we've ever coached. That's because they're going at it full speed. That's because they have Nick Saban in their corner being able to coach them up. That's because a lot of these guys are so well coached. I mean, look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not just Ronnie Harrison, right? Got TJ Yeldon. They got Marcel Darius. They got Cam Robinson. They even got long snapper Carson Tinker, who was a fan favorite for a lot of time there as part of the football team in Alabama. That's kind of the imprint you get when you have guys like Doug Maroney who are coming out and speaking to programs and saying that kind of thing. I'm not sure there's anything we can possibly throw at Ronnie Harrison that he doesn't already know, or a coverage he hasn't already seen, or some type of defensive scheme that he's not already aware of. I think that tells you all you need to know about that pipeline that Nick Saban really has extended to a ton of these guys, being able to come in and really pick up a lot of these players out of Alabama and head on to the NFL. LaRon N. Noble says DBU. Now, I know that Florida and LSU and some of these other programs still kind of claim DBU, but I got news for you. The DBs that are coming out of Alabama here the last couple of years are as good, if not better, than any other program in the country that are putting them out right now. Cornelius Cottle says, what about running backs? Bobby J. Smith, like I said earlier, weighing in with an NFL pipeline. New Jack over in the YouTube comment section, love the Ronnie Harrison. Ball hawk, great pass rusher. Ronnie Harrison could do it all. And I think Doug Maroney, looking at what he's going to bring to that football team, says, you know what? He can play free safety. He can play nickel. He can play strong safety. He can get down in the box. He's willing to hit anybody walking up in that box right now. Matt Morrell, I think, I hope I'm saying the name correct in the Facebook comment section, asking me a question. Mike, when you first went to Bama, did you think you would win a national championship? Now, I had high hopes. I had a lot of high hopes. Bama was actually my only scholarship offer. Mike Shula kind of found me. I was kind of under the radar. Mike Shula, Bobby Conley, a lot of the coaches that were on staff back in 2005 when I was a senior in high school kind of come and find me on the radar. They offered me. I commit before there was even a story about it. Did I want to win a national championship? Absolutely. Do I understand how big of a deal it would be at Alabama to do that 5 years later? Absolutely not. But when I left the program there in 2009, can't tell you how thankful I was that I got a chance to be a part of that program and do some of the great things. Shannon Burtis, a good buddy of ours over on SC Country Live, here to support, man. DBU cut deep. Obviously a great LSU fan. So, Shannon, I appreciate you watching, man. And I got to send a big Roll Tide to you, man. Looking forward to that game this year, as always, heading down to Baton Rouge for that one. I'll be there in the stands for that game. So before I leave you guys every day, and this is Wednesday, so this is Scott Cochran video of the week kind of day when you talk about Scott Cochran has this text message chain, right? Scott Cochran likes to send all these videos out to not only his current players, but some of his former players. I'm included on that list. So I like to bring you guys some of the videos of just the message that Scott Cochran and this football team and Nick Saban are trying to get to these current players. I mentioned last week, a lot of these guys were fresh faces, showing up on campus, doing a lot of the good things that you've grown accustomed to. Well, how do they get that mindset? Well, it's through some of these videos that Scott Cochran sent out. And this one's a short one. This is Victor Oladipo, I think, from the NBA. But Scott Cochran wanted to make sure this message got out to a lot of his players that are on campus. Here's Scott Cochran's video of the week right here.
How motivated are you to get back in the gym, like right now? Or do you want to take some time and just let it marinate a little bit?
I don't know how to take time off, so I had somebody tell me, take a break and enjoy your life. I say, this is my life. So,
boy, I got to tell you, as a Bama fan, a guy who used to sit in that weight room, who used to be under Scott Cochran, you love that mindset. There's 3 months building. You got to go through the 110s right now. You got to go through, the fourth quarter drills. You got to do all those things over in 100-degree heat over in Tuscaloosa, and having that kind of mindset is this is my life. There's no, hey, I don't want to, take interim off. I don't want to take summer school and make sure I'm having a good time. This is my life. I'm part of this program. I am a football player. A lot of you guys weighing in. Deborah McCullough Mangum says, Roll Tide, Mike. Terrence Branyan says, Scott Cochran would be a WWE promo superstar if he wasn't at Bama. Wayne Stratton kind of weighing in and saying, what a beast, talking about Scott Cochran. I can't tell you guys really how lucky Alabama is to have a guy like Scott Cochran. New Jack over in the YouTube comment section said he's the opposite of Allen Iverson. I tend to agree with that. That definitely, we always heard that practice rant from Allen Iverson, and that's one of the funny things that goes on. Wayne Stratton kind of quoting Scott Cochran says, every day is game day. Definitely agree with that. Hope those guys will continue to build on everything they're doing inside of that program, building up to, like I said, 87 days away. They're going to be kicking off against Bobby Petrino and the Louisville Cardinals down there in Orlando. So thank you guys for joining us today. If you're a fan of SEC Country Live, we'll be back on this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern time with Hannah Chalker and Brandon Walker. My name is Mike Johnson. I've had a good time with you guys today. If you could, please share the show. Roll Tide Daily is on Monday through Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, noon Central. All your friends back in Alabama, all your friends throughout the Southeast, whether it be on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever you're doing, making sure you're sharing the show. We love to talk to you guys on a daily basis, kind of chop it up in the comment section, getting you guys ready for that kickoff there in 87 days to play Louisville. So until next time, you guys have a good day and Roll Tide.
watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.